introducing ham radio to a new community. Now, we're going to talk about what that community is. Now, Wayne, unfortunately, Wayne, as I mentioned, can't be here tonight, but a little bit about Wayne. Wayne is a technical writer, graduated from UCLA with an engineering degree. He's worked for, he actually worked for ARRL headquarters with their public information office there, and worked with publications and all the information that they do. He was with marketing with Kenwood USA. One of the things when he was at the ARRL, one of the things that was interesting that he got involved in was the publicity for Owen Garriott's flight on the shuttle. And so he got to travel down to Houston and do all kinds of fun stuff with that. So I just wish he was here to talk about all that stuff, but he isn't tonight. But anyway, we got together on this little project. So we're going to share this, and hopefully folks can take some good stuff away from this. So here we go. So in 2011, this is going back a few years, Wayne and I traveled up to San Mateo. Why did we do that? We went to go see the greatest show and tell on earth, and that is known as the Maker Faire Bay Area. Now, some of you, a lot of you have probably heard of Maker Fairs. This was the granddaddy. This is where it started. I think in 2007 or 2008 was when the first one took place in San Mateo. But we'd never, well, I had not heard of Maker Faire at this point in 2011. And I purchased some stuff from Maker Shed. And in the course of getting the goodies from Maker Shed, I ended up with 2 free tickets to Maker Faire in San Mateo. So I'm talking to Wayne, and we said, well, hey, let's go check it out. So we took a drive up there from the Orange County, LA area. Actually, it was Orange County. I was living in Orange County then. So we made the drive up to San Mateo. We stayed the night up there, but we went up to check this thing out because we wanted to see what this was all about. So this takes place at the San Mateo Event Center, which is a huge, like a fairgrounds. At the time, it's evolved into what they now call the Event Center. And this event will host over 100,000 visitors. And in terms of makers, and we'll talk a little bit more about what makers are, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, literally hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 makers there. And this is where it's cool to be smart, is at a Maker Faire. So a little intro video here. And oh, wait a minute, I've got to do one thing, is make sure you get the audio. There you go. Okay. So here we go. This should be going anytime now, please. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of what Maker Faire looks like, real quick. That, if you're interested, that is actually about it's a few minutes long. I didn't want to play the whole video, but it's a really nice video that gives an overview of the Maker Faire in San Mateo. But it really, for their first time going there in 2011, it was totally overwhelming. And one of the comments that Wayne made was, it's a lot like visiting Disneyland for the first time. You just can't take it all in. It's impossible. And just the stuff that we saw there that first time we went in 2011, just all kinds of makers, all kinds of do-it-yourself projects, all kinds of electronics and robotics and all kinds of other technologies. But it's not limited to that. There's all kinds of other things, not just electronics and that technology. There's arts and crafts. We've got props and costumes like cosplay. A lot of makers doing that, wood and metalworking. There was a complete wood and metal shop there that was a company, a startup that was doing, it was like belonging to a sports club. You could belong to their shop and use their equipment with a monthly membership fee, which was a pretty cool idea. Let's see, we had home improvement projects, of course, kinetic sculptures, a lot of steampunk. And along with all the steampunk stuff, a lot of things with fire, and fire is neat. especially on the scale that these guys do this stuff. Pedal powered vehicles of all things, and lots of other vehicles, but just so much. But in our estimation, something was missing. Something was missing from this collection of stuff. But what's missing? Well, let me talk a little bit about what Maker Faire is first, and then we'll talk about what's missing. So Maker Faire, and this is their description. It's a 2-day family-friendly festival of invention, creativity, and resourcefulness, and a celebration of the maker movement. Family-friendly, absolutely, kid-friendly, and just a wonderful place. Just a lot of people having a whole lot of fun, which is like going to Disneyland, right? So I consider it a gathering of like-minded individuals. There are lots of engineers, there's lots of students, there's lots of fabricators, artists, and just plain ordinary folks out there going to this thing. And one aspect of Maker Faire is combining some of these things together, like for instance, art and technology. Combining art and technology is a lot of that going on there. But it's all about just building stuff. That's what the maker movement's about. Build stuff, have fun, build things. And also there's a STEM side to this, getting young people interested in science and engineering and technology, right? We want to, and you see little kids there, little kids going to this thing. So that you want to start young and make it fun. And that's what it's all about. Now, I have to say the San Mateo Maker Faire is no longer in existence. It shut down 2 years ago because the parent company went out of, well, they went bankrupt. They're back in business, and one might hope that maybe they'll come back again, but it was sponsored by Make Magazine. If you're familiar with that publication, makezine.com, they sponsored the Bay Area, Maker Faire Bay Area, and it was quite an undertaking. And they got into some financial problems, and that last year that they had it, 2019, it was kind of a disaster. So we won't talk much about that one. But I want to share with you some of the stuff that we got to see there that first time we went out there. I love this stuff. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'd be in heaven. There's R2-D2s everywhere. And people, you know, this is an organization that builds these things. They manufacture these things. There's also what I call whimsical maker projects. This one's kind of interesting. This is a vehicle that's, Jormungand Midgard. This thing is amazing. 50 feet long. They drive it around all over the fairgrounds. 15,000 addressable LEDs and a 200-watt sound system everywhere it goes. It was pretty incredible. So this is one of the mobile things that's going on up there. Another one is this one, which is a cupcake, right, from Acme Muffineering, which we got a big kick out of that. And these guys have been there many, many, many times. But one that's really sophisticated that we saw was this thing. This is Russell the Electric Giraffe. Now, Russell has actually been to the White House. When Obama was in office, he hosted a maker event at the White House, and Russell the Electric Giraffe was one of the makers that was invited to go to the White House. And this thing is completely automated. It moves under its own power. It has all kinds of tactical sensors located all over. You touch them, it'll interact with you. You can see there's a child there playing with the sensors on its nose. This thing is huge, and they ride. You know, you ride around on it. He rides around. It uses two PCs to operate the thing. And the fellow that built it, I cannot remember his name. He's works on industrial control systems. So this is a natural for him to do this kind of a project. It's just beautiful. But some of the other things are very static. Things like Zome Dome and Face Forward. These are art structures. The structure that's a structure that's held together completely with wooden connectors, the little pins that hold it together. No metal fasteners in that thing whatsoever. I mentioned cosplay and costumes. This guy, he was amazing, Sean Thorsen. He does all types of this type of work, building props and cosplay and costumes. So I'm not sure if he does stuff for the movie industry, but he does a lot of this kind of gear, like what he's doing there. Some of the other interesting things, anybody who's into railroading, live steam. They had a live steam display. Ultimate Cookies was an Arduino powered cookie machine that would, you'd sit there with the menu and select what ingredients you wanted in your cookie, and it would produce that cookie for you, which was kind of cool. And I mentioned the grind. If any of you are amateur astronomers, somebody was making a telescope. They were grinding mirrors at Maker Faire. So a little bit of everything there. Now the next one, this one, it was really over the top. If you're familiar with Animusic was I want to say it was done in the early 2000s, and it was a computer animated CGI representation of instruments being played and the music going along with it. Well, it was all animated, right? It's all CGI. Intel decided to build one for real. And so they built this thing. This is their Pipe Dream, which is the piece that was animated. If you look up Animusic Pipe Dream, you can find the original recording of it. It's quite spectacular, but this thing actually worked. And I don't have a recording of it here, but suffice to say, this thing actually works. And what it does is it shoots like ping pong balls out of a launcher that land on the various sensors, and it makes a sound. And of course, they would run this thing every hour or so, and it would run for a few minutes, 3 minutes or so. And of course, then they'd get the crowd to help them collect all the balls up that got out of the cage and are all over the floor, all over the hall, which was pretty funny. So seeing all this stuff, what actually was missing? And the thing that struck us immediately was that there wasn't much participation in ham radio. And what was there, I said there wasn't much, but what was there was kind of mixed. The ARRL Pacific Division was there, and not to, I mean, I'm a member of the Pacific Division here. That's where we live. And not to say anything bad about the Pacific Division, but it was very disappointing. It was like going into a bookstore, and there really wasn't anything there to interact with, and the people weren't really interacting with anybody. It was just kind of dull. So that was kind of a bummer. And the other obvious thing that you'd think of is people setting up an HF radio outside the hall. And I just say, meh, you know, people weren't going and looking at, people weren't interested in that. They, you know, it's like, okay, whatever, what is this? There's a booth and a radio, you know, it's like, so what? Now the stuff that did interest them, that got a lot of interest, high altitude balloon launches with a camera and APRS, and they followed that back at their booth. And this was done with, obviously, with ham radio. And what they did is they launched the balloon when the fair started on Saturday morning. And that was spectacular. That was really cool. I like that. The other thing that was cool was one of the universities, and I don't recall who it was, but they were displaying their CubeSat. Oscar, you'd appreciate this. And that kind of thing is awesome. And they've been back there many, many times. But think about it. Think about ham radio. We've been makers for more than 100 years. I mean, these guys, this maker community is a relatively new thing in the last 2 decades, but we've been doing this forever. So Wayne and I, we're looking at each other and we're going, there's a thought. Let's do a different kind of ham radio booth, something that was going to interest people and draw. Okay. So the call for makers for 2012 came out, and we got on the list. We sent in a proposal, we got it accepted, and we were in. What we wanted to do was, and this is why I'm talking about that HF, having an HF radio set up in a booth and having a bookstore. Nah, that's not what we do. We want to dispel that stereotyped ham. We do keep up with the times. We do keep up with technology. We are from all walks of life. And there's a little bit of everything in ham radio for everybody. And we have a lot of fun with what we do. And anyone can become a ham. We've been makers for 100 years or more. So this was kind of our mission, what we wanted to do. And we wanted to present this. And so what was created was Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. And there's Wayne and me with a beard and long hair, and Mrs. W6DQ, my better half over here, our KF6QNG, Lisa. She wasn't there the first year, but she went for the last few years we went up there. So she was part of our team. Yay. So Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. Believe it or not, we applied for and received a 20-foot booth near a main entrance to one of the exposition halls. We wanted to be by one of the entrances because we were going to be doing some stuff with microwave radio. And we wanted to be able to have a clear, unobstructed view out the door, out through that entrance, out to one of the beacons that was on one of the mountaintops nearby and in the Bay Area. So we were adjacent to the ARRL Pacific Division booth, of course. They tended to put us all in the same spot. And I will tell you, Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio is a collaboration of 3 groups. We've got the San Bernardino Microwave Society, which I've spoken about here before when I talked about the introduction to microwave communications. So that's one of the groups I talked about there. And San Diego Microwave Group from San Diego, California, and the 50 megahertz and up group from the Bay Area. The 3 groups got together to do this booth. And what we wanted to do was to showcase non-mainstream radio stuff. You know, just HF radio, that's mainstream. We didn't want to show that off. We wanted to show off something different. And so now we got to get to work. We got to figure out what we're going to do. Well, first thing is to come up with our goals. One of the things we wanted to present was the STEAM or the STEM aspects of ham radio. We wanted to show how kids can get involved in it. And one of the things that happened, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is we got involved with UC Davis College of Engineering, which was incredible. What an incredible relationship we created with those guys. But we wanted to show some of the cutting edge amateur radio tech of the day. This is back in 2012. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how things progressed after that. But we wanted to talk about things like microwave communications up to 76 gigahertz. We wanted to talk about microcontroller based ham radio projects. We wanted to talk about software defined radios, wireless mesh networking, broadband hamnet and Arden, right? We wanted to talk about ATV. That was another thing that we wanted to bring up. And what we wanted to say was that amateurs are not necessarily the way we're portrayed in the media. You know, yeah, we're a bunch of old guys using a dead technology. No, we're not that. We do all this cool modern stuff too. But I got to tell you, I told you in my introduction, you know, I'm into vintage radios. So personally, I do enjoy that old technology with vacuum tubes and all that stuff. But I also enjoy the cutting edge stuff too. And I have all kinds of interesting technology things that we play with. So a little bit more on that now. Here's our group. We were maker number 7660, Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. And we consisted of, there's Wayne there in the foreground, KH6WZ, Brian Yee from the 50 megahertz and up group, myself in the background there, Dennis, Tony from San Diego Microwave, or San Diego San Diego Microwave Group, right. And Mike Lavelle also from 50 megahertz and up group in the Bay Area. So this was our first team in 2012. So the kinds of things we showed off were things like microwave radios. Here's a 10 gigahertz radio that Wayne built. And this was out in front. There were a lot of traffic, a lot of people coming by and looking at it and trying to understand what it was. And we'd explain, you know, and they got it, they were interested in it. It was really kind of cool. And this was actually an operating radio. We were able to receive the beacons and transmit. They've actually got a what's called a translator at their beacon site. So we could talk to other hams on 10 gigahertz, which we did, which was pretty cool. I put together, I mentioned broadband ham network. I put together a BBHN network. Now in 2012, this was still BBHN. We were using the Linksys WRT54G routers and some Ubiquiti rockets. We had 6 nodes up running voice, video, and data around this booth. And you can see some of the telephones there. And that was very interesting. A lot of attention. If you notice the stack of routers that's in the picture in the lower right, that drew a lot of attention, interestingly enough. People were, what's the stack of routers for? And so we'd explain, well, we're amateurs and, you know, these are part 15 devices, which you can't modify, but we're hams, we can. We're allowed in part 97 to modify these things. So we put new software into it and we build a mesh network out of it. So there was a lot of interest in that, a lot of interest in that. And of course I have to throw in the obligatory, it's wireless. How come there's so many wires? And that was a comment by my wife, Mrs. W6DQ. I had to toss that out there. Yeah, that BBHN network, we had wires running everywhere, but because we couldn't use antennas, everything was done on coax. So I had coax running everywhere, attenuators and splitters and combiners and all kinds of stuff. But it was pretty funny. Okay, Tony had his microwave gear, 3 different microwave radios on the same tripod. This is all portable equipment, by the way. We contest with this stuff. And he had 2 of the 76 gigahertz transceivers, and we were basically having QSOs across the booth with his 76 gig radios. So he's quite a fabricator, pretty amazing guy. We should try and get him on here on RATPAC sometime. He is a fascinating person. Well, I had one of my 10 gig radios out there. This is a 10 and 24 gigahertz software defined radio. And one of the things that popped up out of this was interest in software defined radio. Everybody, a lot of the folks coming by the booth had heard of SDR. They had no idea what it was. And so that was a cue for us in the future to do more with SDR and basically explain what SDR was, explain how it works. And we got a lot of mileage out of that in the following years doing that with software defined radio. But this is a dual band 1024 gigahertz software defined radio. It's actually hooked up to an omnidirectional antenna, which is not hooked up. You can see it sitting off there to the left of the radio. You can see the antenna sitting there. It's what's called a slot antenna, waveguide slot antenna. So another thing I had there was a project that was kind of fun. I called it the 10 gigahertz Synchrodine receiver. This was a proof of concept. It's Synchrodine, it's direct conversion. So you're familiar with, like, a lot of QRP radios are direct conversion. This is direct conversion for 10 gigahertz. And interesting concept. And what it's eventually going to become is a 10 gigahertz handy talkie. And that's the plan. And this was the prototype proof of concept of that system. So that was shown off at Maker Faire for a couple of years. Brian from 50 megahertz and up, he played with some automation things. He built a Morse keyboard and a station controller using Hamstack. If you're familiar with Hamstack, if you haven't heard of that, that was a product made by George Zafiropoulos, and he's KJ6VU. He does the ham radio workbench. That was one of his projects years ago, and he had given us some of the Hamstacks to play with. George is a good friend, known him for many years. And we always tried to get him to come to Maker Faire. Unfortunately, Maker Faire's Bay Area was the same weekend as Dayton, so we could never get him there. He was always off at Dayton selling his stuff. So the other project that Brian had was the wireless spaceball controller. And this was, again, something extremely interactive. And that's the key to it, is having displays that are interactive that kids can play with. He's got a little hand controller using Arduino and XB to control the spaceball, which is an AS-L controller for satellite television, for mobile satellite TV for your RV. Well, he was using that for his 10 gigahertz radio. So he put that out there, and it drew a lot of attention, to say the least. San Diego Microwave Group had some interesting projects, and they've shown this off a few times, not necessarily at Bay Area, but at San Diego Maker Faire. And Kerry Banky, N6IZW, had this, what we call the quick and dirty 10 gigahertz rig. It's a THF6 Kenwood handheld on 440, actually on 432, with what's called a harmonic mixer. And if we zoom in on the picture a little bit, you can see the little gadget that's up there, a little SMA connector. And if you look really carefully, you can see a little quarter wave vertical antenna. And at the base of that antenna is a little impact diode. It's basically generating scads of harmonics. Not very legal, to tell you the truth. But the 24th harmonic of 432 megahertz is 10.368 gigahertz, which is the start of the narrow band or single sideband portion of 10 gigahertz spectrum. So we were able to have QSOs with this thing with a 10 gigahertz receiver, and Kerry's handy talkie with this little diode on there to generate the harmonics. And of course, you're generating microwatts of energy, all those harmonics. It was pretty poor signal. Fortunately, not leaving the building, but probably a little bit on the illegal side with all the spurious emissions, because they certainly aren't down. One of the other projects that's kind of fun is this thing. It's a 2304 megahertz radio. It's a poloplexer, actually, made out of fruit juice cans, and it's on 2304. It uses a 2-meter transceiver for its IF radio. And we had 2 of those down there spread across the booth. So the kids, again, it was interactive. The kids could play with these and talk to each other across the booth. And it was a good sized booth in San Diego where this was set up. So some of the other stuff we showed off. I mentioned Tony Long. He has his own business, is Reactance Labs, and he generates a lot of products for microwave. And 2 of the products he had on display there were the Open Synth, which is a frequency synthesizer, and the Times4, which is a 4 times multiplier. And that's how you get your local oscillator, your LO for 10 gigahertz if you're doing down conversion. That's what this equipment is for. So some microwave stuff. The other thing is we had a big LCD display, a big monitor, and we ran a show on the monitor of microwave activity. So we had like, I don't know, close to 100 photographs of various operations around the country on microwave, showing what hams do with microwaves. And these are just 3 examples of that stuff. Now, shifting gears a little bit, one of the really cool things about Maker Faire, if you're a maker, Friday is setup. Friday night is party time, and they feed us. And this is all provided by the Maker Faire. They have paella and beer. So they got a beer wagon out there that's pouring beer, and they have the big paella pans. And this is Gerard's paella from, I think they're from Sonoma County is where he comes from. And they had the big pans out there making their paella. And let me tell you, it was incredibly good. And we had a blast with that. There's the crowd. Those guys are all makers. These aren't visitors. These are makers. These are people who have spent the day setting up their equipment and setting up their displays. And there's Gerard, the fellow with the white hair down there in the lower right. That's Gerard and his pans. Well, here was an interesting thing in 2012. Radio Shack had a large presence there, believe it or not. Oh, yeah, that's right, Radio Shack. Radio Shack was providing free, hang on a second, there we go. Yeah, free parts and tools, whatever was on hand. These guys pulled up with a 20-foot container that was jam-packed with stuff. And if you showed up with your badge, they would give you anything you needed, batteries, whatever. You went over and got some stuff, I think. The one, no, that wasn't you weren't there that year. That's right. Never mind. No, Lisa wasn't there that year. Somebody from the booth went over and came back with a pile of stuff, some tool kits and all kinds of crazy stuff. But what a neat thing, you know, great advertising for them. And especially at a place like Maker Faire. But we thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty generous on the part of Radio Shack in 2012. Keep that in mind as we move forward. Yeah, well, so one of our other, as we moved on in years, we had some more people involved. Joel Wilhite, KD6W, talking about one of the displays there, explaining something to the kids and the parents. That's actually a lightning detector is what he's explaining there, but there's a spectrum analyzer and a few other things in the background there. Joel also brought his 10 gigahertz radio, and I say portable. These things are portable, but they're still luggable, maybe is a better way to call it. But this is for microwave contesting. Brian had a 24 gigahertz beacon set up there that he brought. So these are all the kinds of things that we do. Now, next slide. Some of you will understand this. Some of you will, I'm not going to explain it, but some of you will get it. And I just thought this was the funniest thing. So I'll let that sink in for a minute. If you're a web designer, you get this, but I love that last comment. Droids, this is not the hall you are looking for. So that was actually on all the entrances into the expo hall. That was pretty cool. Well, we had another visitor that year that was kind of interesting. And this led us to a long series of encounters. Some of you may know this person. Some of you may know her, Jerry Ellsworth, if you've ever heard of Jerry. She is probably, what would you say, the consummate maker. This lady is crazy. She makes MOSFETs in her kitchen oven. You know, I mean, who does that? She does. But she actually got on the 76 gigahertz radio and made a contact, and we basically were hounding her to get a ham license. She always thought about getting a ham license. She finally did, and she's now AI6TK, which is pretty cool. But she'd come and visit us every year. She'd come by the booth, and there's some of you recognize Marty there, Marty Wall, N6VI. He's been on here many times on RATPAC. And there's Wayne on the right hand side, and yours truly there off center with the beard and all that. And Jerry, she visited us so many times. We decided we're going to give her her own Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio T-shirt. So, but she got her ham license eventually, and we've seen her at Pacificon. Well, she got her license at Pacificon some years ago. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Well, some other stuff going on at Maker Faire. This is the kind of stuff that you see things like this and you go, you got to be kidding me. How about this? How about a do-it-yourself scanning electron microscope? This was amazing. This was an amazing article there, and it was a working scanning electron microscope that this guy built in his garage. Wow. And I thought we built some crazy stuff as hams. Well, ultimately, we went back again in 2003, and a lot of the same stuff. We had some new projects that we showed off. We tried to come back with fresh things every year. We'd bring the stuff that was interesting, especially software-defined radio. That got a lot of interest. So we'd always come back with software-defined radio, something different each year. But in 2003, Radio Shack was back again. They met us when we came in the gates with coffee and donuts. And the only thing I could say is this had to be a prediction of things to come. Oh, well. But that was the end of, that was the last time we saw Radio Shack there. In keeping with the STEM theme, I mentioned this earlier about the UC Davis, University of California, Davis, College of Engineering. We partnered with them and we shared our booth with them for many years at San Mateo. And what they would do was they bring in their senior projects from the engineering school and they would display the projects there. Now, one of the interesting projects was this one. It was a frequency modulated CW radar. This was one of the projects they had on display at our booth that year. And pretty amazing. These guys did some really, really cool stuff. And the way we got hooked up with them is the microwave community I mentioned, global microwave community, amateur microwave community. We have an annual get together called Microwave Update, or MUD. And we were holding MUD that particular year in Santa Clara, I think we were in Santa Clara. We were in the Bay Area anyway. And of course it gets published, and the professor, one of the professors at the College of Engineering who ran this senior project program had seen the advertisements for Microwave Update and asked if he could attend. And he contacted Brian Yee, who I mentioned before, W6BY. And Brian said, please come. And he asked if they could come and do bring some papers and share them at the Microwave Update, which they did. And so we ultimately invited them to come and join us at Maker Faire. And so some of their students came and they shared our booth for a while. Then they got their own booth eventually, but we were really happy to have them with us for quite a while, which was a lot of fun. This is their professor on the left, and he looks like a student. I didn't even realize that he was the professor. He looked like one of the students, but for the life of me, I cannot remember his name, which I really feel bad about. But what an incredible program they had at UC Davis. And some of the other projects they had, one of them was a wireless or stringless harp. It was all done optically, quite a fascinating instrument. But these are some of the projects that they brought out to Maker Faire, which was a lot of fun to have them there. Something else I'm going to share is that second year, maybe the third year, we had a thing called every year they have something called Meet the Makers. And it's an open forum where makers are invited to present their projects. They're invited in to come and present at the forum. Well, this particular year, we got invited to participate. Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. We were invited to participate at the forum. I got tapped to do the presentation. So I go up there with my projects. It's just a great opportunity to talk up ham radio. But I go up there with my Synchrodine receiver, the 1024 rig, those two radios that I showed you that I built. Those were on display there, and we talked about them, and we talked about Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. And we also had our UC Davis students that were with us. They came up and discussed some of their projects. Well, this led to another opportunity, which was kind of fascinating. I was approached after the forum, and I was asked if I'd be interested in co-authoring a book on Arduino projects. And I said, yeah, I'm game for that. Why not? Exposure is good for ham radio. So more on that little opportunity a little later. But some of the other things that happened at Maker Faire, we actually received awards for our booth. These are two of the awards that we received. The one on the left is called Best in Class. And this has to do with the classification of our display and the fact that it contained such an educational component of what we were talking about, the educational component of Not Your Grandpa's Ham Radio. We were awarded this Best in Class in 2016. That same year, we were down in San Diego at Balboa Park for another Maker Faire there, and we received a Maker of Merit award from the folks down there in San Diego. So we were pretty proud of that. Those are some couple of really cool things that we ended up with from our efforts up there. So that was, yeah, Bay Area and San Diego, 2016. Well, let me talk a little bit about attendance at these fairs. Now, the Bay Area Maker Faire, I mentioned earlier, the largest group we saw there was about 150,000 people. 150,000 people. And I'm sure every single one of those people came by our booth and talked to us. Let me tell you, by the end of 2 days, we were hoarse. But we got some other opportunities to go elsewhere. Like, for instance, here in Santa Ana in Orange County here in Southern California, there's a place called the Discovery Science Center, and they hosted a thing called Meet the Makers. And since we're from Orange County, we were invited to come and put on our display down there that we had from Bay Area. And we don't know what the actual count was, but literally thousands of people came and saw what was going on at the Discovery Science Center. University of California, Irvine in 2012 had a mini Maker Faire. And a mini Maker Faire is a little different. It's a one-day event, single event, very small. So 1,000 people would come to that. We did 2 of those, one in 2012, one in 2013, 1,000 or so participants there. Not that many makers, maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen makers, and that's it. The first San Diego event we went with was what's called a mini Maker Faire, which is like those others, the UCI fairs. It's a single day event, and it drew about 5,000 people, and they had roughly 100 makers there. Several years later, they skipped 2014. They started again in 2015, and we got invited to go there. We were invited to go in 2016, and they had over 35,000 visitors. Okay, now to put this in perspective, Dayton gets about 25,000 visitors, right? This is like the biggest thing that we have in ham radio. But we don't have to sell ham radio to anybody there. Those guys are already sold on ham radio. These are people who don't know about ham radio. And what an opportunity to be able to get in front of those people and show them something that they haven't seen before. We would get some interesting comments. Oh, people still do ham radio? Well, absolutely. And this is the stuff we do. You know, it was an experience. It was an experience for us, and quite an enjoyable one. So we went for quite a few years to the Bay Area from 2012 to 2019. And 2019 was the last one they held. And I will explain that the reason that they shut down was financial. The company got into some financial difficulties. They changed out their management team, and all of the perks and things that were going on all those previous years from 2007, 2008, all the way up to 2018 disappeared. And the people that were managing it didn't really understand what we were doing, and it just really was not a very good setup. Well, 2019 was the last Maker Faire Bay Area. Personally, I'm hopeful that they'll come back someday. I think it's, again, that Bay Area Maker Faire is just an incredible venue for talking about ham radio, but so is any Maker Faire. And that's where we're going to get to the point. Maker Faire represents a huge opportunity for us as hams. The San Mateo attendance, as I stated, on years has exceeded 150,000. These Maker Fairs are attended by open-minded, tech-savvy people. They're interested in new stuff. And the other thing that's there are kids. This is a great place to get kids interested in ham radio. Maker Fairs are being held all over the world. They're everywhere. And anybody can set up a Maker Faire. And the parent organization still exists. They're back from their bankruptcy, and they have a web presence, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But again, these Maker Fairs are the perfect venue. And what I'm recommending for those that are interested is to organize a group to do an exhibit. And the interesting part of this is non-commercial exhibitors, which we would be, no cost. Now, those of you out there who have done trade shows, you know how much it costs for a booth at a trade show. Imagine if you were purchasing a 20-foot booth at a trade show. You're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. We had a 20-foot booth for years. It didn't cost us a dime. It was given to us for use because we were not there for commercial purposes. One year, we actually had a 30-foot booth. I can't even begin to think what that would cost at a trade show. Probably $20,000 for a 30-foot booth at a trade show for a commercial vendor. The things are ridiculous. Zero cost. And we got to pick our pick our location, which was important for us because we wanted to do the microwave radio stuff. And having access to an open doorway, a big roll-up door, we could point straight out at the beacon and the translator on 10 gigahertz and have QSOs on microwave radio, which was pretty neat to be able to do that. So here we're going to talk about recommendations. Here, if you want to do something like this, these are the things you want to do. And the first and foremost is safety. Safety first, last, and always. Kids are there. It has to be kid safe. Interactive is something that's really important. That people want to be able to touch and twiddle knobs and push buttons and throw switches. And we did that. We made displays that just flashed lights and did stuff like that. Let me tell you, people would hoard to our booth to play with the switches and lights and buttons, because other booths, they weren't allowed to touch stuff. So in our booth, they could interact and play with these things. But the other thing to remember is that you represent, if you go to a maker fair and you're a presenter, you're representing our entire amateur radio community. So your appearances are important, and what you show off and what you present are important. And we say, make it look professional. You want to include literature, handouts, contact information, a website. All these things are really important. You want a consistent look. We had custom shirts made up. We had a backdrop where we would hang our artwork, and we had a uniform style guide for our posters that we put up, so they all look the same. We included current technology. So we were doing things that people would be interested in, like microcontrollers, microwave communications, and software-defined radio. Software-defined radio turned out to be one of the most interesting things that people were after. They'd see that we had something about that, and they'd come up and ask us to explain it and what it was all about. And they could, we've heard this term before. Well, amateurs use that, huh? Yeah. And I mentioned the interactive displays, bright lights, switches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You want to get folks to come up and be attracted to your booth. The other thing, a lot of times you can work with the staff to find a nice location. And don't worry about displaying commercial gear. Put up a commercial radio, put up some commercial equipment, but homebrew stuff is much, much better. I mean, that's the whole point of Maker Faire. But on the side of the things that you want to do, there's some things that you don't want to do. And namely, don't use jargon. Use plain English to explain things. You want your grandma to be able to understand it, right? So you've got to use plain English. And this is one of the faults that people will fall into, is using jargon. You don't want to do that. And the other thing, and I mentioned this in one of my first charts, that the group that had set up an HF radio, nah, that was not a good idea. Don't set up an HF rig and make noise. People aren't that interested in it, believe it or not. Now, once you get them hooked on ham radio, then you can get them interested in it. But you got to get them hooked first. And HF is not the hook. You're dealing with people like this who are into the technical stuff, and you want to show them something really neat, like a stack of Arduino routers, right? There you go, mesh networking. That's something that a lot of the students were really interested in that, and they'd come up and talk to us about it. You also don't want to sell anything in your booth. If you sell anything in your booth, you are now a commercial booth, and it's going to cost you money. So that's important. I mentioned appearance is everything, right? Well, that's what we look like. I think that's a pretty professional looking group right there. We have the shirts printed up for our members, and we had them to give away. We had that uniform black background that this is a chain link fence behind us, and it looks through to the booth on the other side. That's not cool. we wanted to block out those other booths that were both next to us and behind us. So we put up the black cloths, and that really made a difference in what the booth looked like. Big banner announcing who we were. And it was a very clean setup when we were done. Very nicely laid out with tablecloths. These are convention wooden tables, fold-up tables. So they're pretty ratty looking. You don't want to have your stuff sitting on that table. You want to have it sitting on a nice tablecloth like that. So that worked out really well. I mentioned the standardized graphics. I'm going to leave this one up here for a couple of minutes because I want to see if anybody comments on this. This was one of the projects that went to Maker Faire one year by me. And it was kind of done as a joke, but it got kind of serious. It is, why not, right? So yeah, that was kind of fun. We got a lot of comments about that. That was good. All right. So if you decide to do this, here's where you go. Upcoming opportunities. This is the current list on Maker Faire on their website, makerfaire.com/map. These are the upcoming Maker Fairs over the next over the next year. And if you do a little research, you'll find there's many, many more that are not listed on their website. So look around your community. There may be a Maker Faire in your community or nearby. If you're in, like we are out in the countryside, maybe in the big city, there's a Maker Faire. Go investigate it. Do a ham radio display. I think it would be, this is a great opportunity for us to expose people to amateur radio in a good light with the technology, and especially getting it exposed to kids, getting young people involved in it, that's our future. We have to do it. So this is our means of sharing amateur radio with another community, mainly the maker community. Now, I mentioned something about another opportunity. So I have to put in a shameless plug. Remember the book I was asked to co-author? There it is. It was released in 2014. It was published by McGraw-Hill and has a number of projects that you can do with Arduino. And it was a lot of fun. I co-authored this book with Jack Purdom, W8TEE. He's going to be speaking here next Wednesday about another project that he is doing. He's going to be our speaker next week. So look forward to meeting Jack next time around. But we did a number of projects in here, and Jack and I had a blast doing this book. It was a lot of fun. So that's that's just something that came out of Maker Faire for me personally. That was a personal achievement that I just really I'm really ecstatic over. So with all that in mind, what will you do? What would you like to do at a Maker Faire? So now, questions and comments. That concludes my presentation, and I'll end the share screen. There we go. All right. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Like an old-fashioned ham fest, only with about 100 times more people. Yeah, that's good, Barry. I like that. Oh,
this is where many years ago, places like this is where we found everybody.
Yep.
Who was interested in radio, and we became hams, and the rest is history.
Yep. Yeah. And this is an incredible experience. Yeah. One of the things I was going to show off, you can see on camera. There's all my badges from San Mateo from all the times we went there. That was a lot of fun. But we went to a lot of other Maker Fairs. Like I mentioned in the list there were a number of them in San Diego, Irvine.
How do you overcome the resistance that a lot of hams have towards makers?
That's a good question. It was interesting that hams would come up to our booth, right? So the hams are there. And they were really surprised to see the stuff we were doing, and really made a lot of contact with a lot of folks doing that stuff. I think it's foolish that we don't embrace the maker movement as hams. I mean, the maker movement is really what we're all about. If you think about it, I mean, traditionally, if you go back 100 years, you couldn't go buy a commercial radio. You didn't go down to your local HRO and pick up a handy talkie. You built your own radio, and folks still do that. We still build our own radios. So since makers are people that like to build stuff and use their hands, there's a great opportunity to put those two things together, make a maker a ham. And so a huge amount of interest. The one thing that I would have liked to have been able to do would have been able to get some metrics. In other words, how many people that came by and visited our booth actually went out and got a license? And we know that there were some that did. There was no question about it, because they'd come back the next year and tell us that they got their license, which was pretty darn cool. And the guys in the next booth eventually, which is the Bayonet Group, they did ham radio testing at Maker Faire. So that's a local amateur radio group from the Bay Area, from the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California. So they actually did testing at the fair, which was pretty neat. So yeah, go ahead, Barry.
So the makers I worked with were fascinated by using microwave control of their robots.
Oh yeah.
With ham radio, they could do it so much easier.
Oh, they could.
With their Part 15 radios. They could control them farther and use more power and do more things. And they were absolutely fascinated. They got the ham radio license. They could do that and experiment.
Yeah, that's right. That's something you can't do.
You couldn't get any clubs to join with them and work with them, because the age difference, and B, the intellectual difference.
Yeah, that's
smartest.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a problem. Yeah, I think that's why getting young people involved, from the Maker Faire perspective, I mean, that's a great place to start. Getting young people interested in amateur radio there, because they're open books. They're like a sponge. And I got to tell you, when we had the mesh network up, a little kid came up to me. I've got my laptop sitting there. This little kid, he had to be like about 7 or 8 years old. He comes up and he goes, "Are you running Linux on there?" Yeah. Well, which one are you running? Oh, Ubuntu, I don't know, it was 12 point something or other. And he was really interested in that. It's like, he's a little kid. that was really nice. Yeah, it was, but that was not the exception. There was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So, the Bay Area is kind of a unique area, but they still have the I think the one in New York, which is called the World. That's called the World Maker Faire. That's probably the biggest one. I think that's still going on. It's on hiatus because of the pandemic. But the Maker Fairs, look into it. If nothing else, just go see it for yourself to see what it's like, because it is like going to Disneyland. It's pretty amazing. Even the mini Maker Fairs are like going to Disneyland. So anyway, that's really, really appreciate everybody being here. I really enjoy sharing this. This was kind of a multi-year project for a number of us. Wayne and myself were kind of the core, but I mentioned Marty was one of our contributors several times, and some other folks from up in the Bay Area, folks from San Diego. We just really had a great team that went through and year after year and did this. So we did it a total of 8 years. We did Maker Faire, 2012 to 2019. We did it at Bay Area. So, and we've seen other folks have done Maker Faire displays. And one of the one group did field day from a Maker Faire, and I'm going, well, I don't know. People aren't going to understand that much. It's like, I think, yeah, maybe, but I think being inside, having something technology, displaying our technology, the stuff that we work with, rather than setting up a radio and talking to people. I think,
hey, Dennis,
that's the thing. Yeah, Marty, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I'll tell you, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate you and Wayne inviting me to come along for several years. A couple of things that struck me. One is I remember going out in the back area, and there was a ham group there with repeaters, and they were demonstrating talking on repeaters, and there was nobody around them.
Yep.
It was a dead zone.
That was the same one I was talking about. They had HF radios. They had some HF radios. Yeah, and they had handy talkies. Yeah, that's the group that was out back of our hall. Yeah,
and everything we had where they could touch or do something, they were lined up, and that I think is really that's the message. Interestingly, I mentioned I was on the ARRL board at the time.
Yes, you were.
And I mentioned to headquarters that we were that we were going and we wanted to get some literature, but the problem was we had some custom literature printed up. The problem was nobody wanted to take paper. All they wanted to do was take pictures of it. And what we should have done as a follow-up, we should have just had all our literature on a site with a QR code, and all they have to do is snap the QR code and they'd have everything.
Didn't you notice the our posters that we made? You might not have been in on this part of it, but the posters that Wayne and I made, they all had QR codes and they went to a website.
Yeah, mine. I had the one with my 4-band microwave rig.
Yeah,
and yeah, having that as opposed to paper is something that you're used to paper handouts and things at trade shows.
Yeah.
This audience isn't into that.
Not into that. You got your phone, you're going to want a QR code. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And that's why we put the QR codes on our posters. That worked really well for us. And there was also, even on the, the Maker Faire themselves, they give us a poster to put up at the front of our booth. It's got our number is 7660 and it's got a QR code on it. And you go to that QR code and it takes you to their website that talks about our booth, which was kind of cool too. So we were up there. Anyway, it was an experience and one that I look into, folks. Look into if you find one near where you live, go experience it, because you won't regret it. It's pretty amazing, and some of the amazing things, especially being able to go to the one in the Bay Area. I mean, Silicon Valley. You want to talk about technology? Oh my gosh!
I think that was the biggest one in the world.
No. The New York one is the biggest.
Oh, I thought it was bigger. Okay.
Yeah, the New York is bigger, but imagine 150,000. What could be bigger than that? But the Bay Area was the first one. That was their claim to fame. That's where it originated, was in the Bay Area from Make Magazine, and pretty amazing. I miss it. It's like withdrawals. It was just a lot of work for us, but it was very worth it, and a lot just amazing things to see.
Lisa, do you have to give him counseling to keep him going?
Nah, he's got other things that take the place, so he was kind of getting burned out. Don't let him fool you. So,
Well,
time to move on.
I missed 1 year because I got sick.
Mhm.
And I missed the next year I missed the first year because your nephew was sick. Matthew was sick.
Oh, is
And I
that-
missed the second year because I got sick. So yeah, I missed 2 years, unfortunately, 2018 and 2019. And I couldn't go, but I'm glad I didn't go to 2019. I think I would have been really disappointed. I know everybody that did go was.
I see that Larry's got his hand up. You want to come on?
Oh
Larry?
yeah, Larry.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you possibly entertaining maybe going to the Maker's Fair when it opens back up? Or you just kind of
Well,
don't
I
know?
think,
yet?
well, not sure, but yeah, she's saying I'm kind of burned out on it. Yeah, but I had that 2-year break from it, and then we had the pandemic for 2 more years. If they do start it up again, I wish they would, because there's always something new, and it's fascinating to go to. Lots of interesting people, lots of interesting projects, and again, it's that opportunity for us to talk about what we do, and in a different light than what people are used to seeing for ham radio. So that was the big thing to us about that. That's what was most enjoyable about it. Oh yeah, I'd go back in a second.
Maybe
Oh,
Lisa,
yeah.
maybe she's burned out.
Yeah, maybe so. I was going to say, the other thing is that if you are a maker, it's free admission. You don't have to pay to get in. That's the other key. I know that the tickets I got the first year we went were free, but the face value of the tickets were like $45 in 2011. So the tickets aren't cheap if you're just going to visit. But if you're a maker, it's free. You get in for free. That's cool. I like free. Diana, you got your hand up.
I do. I'm thinking about schools having like a extracurricular activity or a field trip, and also scouting, or even other groups like church groups. In healthcare, it's really easy to do education through local churches, and their families get together, so families could be involved in coming out for something like that. Anyway, uh, just a question. Did you see any of those kind of groups, or do you think that would be helpful or useful for those groups to get involved?
There were definitely groups, people going there in groups. There no question about that. Probably like you mentioned, scouting groups. There were scouting groups that actually had displays there, of course. But yeah, I think that absolutely there's power in numbers, you know. You get a group to go together. I would say get a group to go together and host a maker fair, you know, in your community. Maybe not where you are.
Down here, we had maker spaces. We didn't have
Well,
maker
okay,
fairs.
now
Maker spaces were very popular from all kinds of groups.
So makerspace is a little different thing. What a makerspace is, a place where makers could go and have tools and access to tools and things like that to build their projects. So maker fair is where you go and show off your projects and share them with everybody. But yeah, makerspaces, most communities have makerspaces. You'll find those anywhere. And that's another thing to go and check out. You know, I'm glad you brought that up. And Diana, that's something you might look into. Where you are out there, I'm not sure what you might find out in that area, but I'm thinking like maybe, well, Carson City may have some maker spaces. Again, go online, use Google and look for them. They'll pop up.
Well, I think the Bay Area and Oakland had some maker spaces for artists. And
lots.
It's the same concept. And the kids would do after school program
Got it.
through, and it would be grants would support them making things. So it was all paid for.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, a lot of maker spaces. They're membership groups. In other words, you have to pay a membership to belong to a maker space, and the funds are used to outfit the maker space with tools and whatever is needed. And like you say, the art communities, electronics, robotics, boy, just about anything you could think of that people are building things, you'll find a maker space. We have two here in Ridgecrest. You know, we've got communities about 30,000 people. We've got two maker spaces here. One's on hiatus, which is Q's Lab, which Lisa joined. And there's another one whose name I can't remember at the moment that I've been to a couple of times. And I'm not sure what their status is, but they exist here in our community even. So, but of course, this is a technical community with the China Lake, the base here. A lot of engineering people here, a lot of PhDs in our community here, which is pretty amazing. But a lot of technology here, so that's an ideal place for a makerspace. But pandemic shut them down, of course, unfortunately. But yeah, I would. Very. Google is your friend.
Diana, got her hand back up again.
Yeah, another comment?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I know Nevada is really big on getting into robotics. So it may be that some of our radio leadership could have a conversation with some of our officials who are involved in that and get participation that way. It might be an interesting way to bring a number of sectors within the community together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, anywhere there's, you know, wherever there's a university that has any kind of technical programs, engineering programs or anything like that. Like I said, UC Davis, we got hooked up with UC Davis, and that was a wonderful relationship that we had with them, and sharing our booth with those guys and seeing them graduate and go out into industry was really cool. That was great stuff. Oh yeah, yep. See, Larry, did you have your hand up?
At one time I did, not now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
no, I was just thinking if I can, since I got your attention.
Yeah. Well,
I've done a lot of community instructions on certain things, and it's always great to get somebody coming back to you years later saying, "Hey, man, thanks for showing me," or whatever. So I think you know how that feels when you got that guy coming up the next year saying, "Hey, here's how you influenced me."
You betcha.
And that's more gratifying than a piece of paper on the wall or a medal on the chest. To me,
Yeah.
it is anyhow.
You're right. You're absolutely right. That's the gratification of doing something like this, is knowing that you're making a difference. You're doing something that's making a difference in somebody's life. That makes it worth it. That's cool. That's cool. Marty, is Marty, are you still there? I don't see you.
I don't see him.
It's too bad. I was going to ask him about, when he was vice director, Southwest Division. I know that word got back to headquarters, and we were at Pacificon. Lisa and I were at Pacificon one year, and I can't remember who was the CEO that was at Pacificon that year.
Gallagher?
Was it Gallagher? I just don't remember who. Yeah, I think it was Gallagher. Yeah,
Tom Gallagher.
Tom Gallagher from headquarters. Got introduced to him, and his comment was, "Oh, I've heard your name before. We hear you're doing good things out on the West Coast." I thought that was pretty funny, but oh well. But yeah, there just isn't enough that the league is doing with the maker community. That's just such an opportunity that's being missed. But I know that the pandemic has had a big impact on it. But approaching it the right way, approaching it with the right stuff to show to the maker community is the big deal. And I think that's where we fit in there really nice, very nicely. It's a good dovetail. So there you go.
I've been keeping myself muted because my allergies are acting up, and I
Oh,
didn't
no.
blow you guys' ears off.
Oh no.
At any rate, great presentation. You always do a good presentation.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. I'm just sorry Wayne couldn't make it. That was a bummer. Appreciate that, guys and gals. We will have to get Wayne back here, though. We'll get him to talk about something.
Did you update the spreadsheet?
I haven't yet. No.
Okay, cool.
How do you want me to update it?
Just in the idea areas, put down there, and maybe.
Oh, in the ideas area. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. I'll talk to him, and when he's done with his his deadline, I'll talk to him this weekend and see if we can come up with some ideas for something, and we'll get that up there.
Cool. That'd be cool.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Likewise, thank everybody for coming. This was a lot of fun, and I always enjoy sharing this, and it's something near and dear, very passionate about, and it's cool. Go out and make stuff.
The energy that you get from going to one of these things is absolutely amazing.
It's
There's
over.
so much
It is.
energy. It's interesting energy generated by this.
It is, and it's an exciting event, and it's electric. You can feel it. Well, of course, that was the guys with the big Tesla coils. I'm sorry. That made it really electric. But yeah, Tesla coils, good stuff at maker fairs. Well, thanks, Dan. And you're muted. You're still muted, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, my allergies. I want to
Yeah.
thank Lisa too, because her facial expressions all through that. She was laughing and nodding, and it was fun to watch her.
She knows.
I think what we need is a standardized package of launching balloons, something that every maker fair could be standardized on doing, and so they would know how to launch the balloons with the transmitters and everything, and to be able to track them. I think that would be something great.
That would be really cool. We've got two different people who have been on RATPAC talking about balloon launches, and one of them's local here to our Antelope Valley, just south of us. And that was Brian. N6CVO did the thing on the Pico balloons early on.
We can haul Oscar over here, and he can take.
Yeah. Oscar could tell us how to do rocket launches.
You could also tell us how to do balloon launches too.
That's true. Yeah. I like rockets, though. The rockets are cool.
All right. Well, we'll start wrapping this up unless we've got more questions, answers, or comments. Anything?
Got any questions or comments? You can always reach me by email. That's easy. Just my call sign at arrl.net. And there you go. But this has been a lot of fun.
It has been, and thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sorry for getting the word out to everybody late. We had almost 30 people in this presentation, but I sure there's going to be a lot more people viewing it online.
Hopefully they will. Yeah. This will be good.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
73s, everybody.
73. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. See you tomorrow night.
See you tomorrow.